On behalf of Avery Dennison, I can tell you it's our pleasure to sponsor this morning's keynote speaker. Jim Cathcart is the founder and CEO of Cathcart Institute, a team of business advisors who work with owners, leaders, and executives in the areas of executive development and sales improvement. Jim is also co-founder of MentorU.com, a developer of private online learning centers. He's the author of 13 books, including 2 bestsellers, Relationship Selling and The Acorn Principle. In the year 2000, the ebook edition of The Acorn Principle was the #2 national bestseller out of 2,000 titles. In case you were wondering, Stephen King was #1. But there's another side of our speaker which is even more interesting. He's also been a nightclub singer, psychological researcher, bill collector, motorcycle salesman, banker, insurance agent, director of training, meeting planner, association executive, and an internet business owner. He may not be able to hold a job, but I hear he can really hold an audience. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming this morning's speaker, Jim Cathcart.
Good morning. What I'd like to talk with you about is relationship selling, but not just the concept of relationship selling, because that's pretty much what you do. That's the way you operate. That's the kind of people you are. Relationship selling for a new era. I wrote the book Relationship Selling back in 1986. And when I wrote it, it was considered kind of controversial. You know, people would say, well, wait a minute, Cathcart. Relationship selling? That's an oxymoron. Choose. Which word do you want, the relationship or the sale? Well, let me ask you. Which is more important, the relationship or the sale? How many would say the relationship? Okay, that's 2,705. All right? How many would say the sale? Okay, we've got a few bold hands up for that. All right. If you build a relationship and you don't get the sale, in round numbers, what's that worth to you? Okay, so a relationship without a sale is just a social acquaintance, right? What if you get the sale, but you didn't cultivate the relationship? How hard's the next call? Harder than the first call, right? Because people expect today that you're going to be the kind of a person, the kind of a professional who they can relate to, who they can turn to you if they have a need. If something goes wrong, they've got something other than data or contracts to depend on. They've got a person they can connect with, right? So relationship selling is not separable, it's inseparable. The words go together, and they go together totally. So relationship selling involves first behaving as someone's business friend, and as you do that, whether you're getting the business or not, if you become a business friend to them, they start deferring to you for answers to questions or solutions to problems. Okay? So you become their subject expert. And after you've been their subject expert for a little while, you become their preferred source. That's the essence of relationship selling as I see it. Okay? So the question then becomes, when you're dealing with somebody, which are you perceived to be by them? A persuader who's trying to talk them into buying, or a partner who's helping them achieve the result they want? Well, the answer for almost any of us would be, well, I approach it as a partner. Okay? But do they perceive it that you're being their partner? Big difference, right? It's not just what you intend, it's what they experience. Let me give you an example. Here's where I discovered the whole concept of relationship selling in the first place. It was in Arkansas, where I grew up. Where's Lynn? Lynn Pettis. There you are. I grew up in Little Rock. By the way, yes, I've met him. Have to get this out of the way all the time, don't you? I'm the same age as Bill Clinton. We're both 55. We were both born in Arkansas at the same time. He was born in Hope. I was born in Little Rock. We grew up there at the same time. We know a lot of the same people. And if he'd made better life choices, he could be speaking to you right now. But I got the better job. Yes. But I grew up in Arkansas, and back in 1968, I was working for GMAC. I was a field representative. Translation, bill collector. Now, 1968, I was 22 years old. Look at this face. This is 55. Can you picture me at 22? 22, I looked about 4. I always had the rosy cheeks, you know, didn't have gray hair back then. I was kind of a baby face. And what I was doing for a living was repossessing log trucks in the hills of northern Arkansas, up around Mountain View. On a typical day, I'd drive down some deserted logging road. I'd get back in the woods. I'd find this big truck I'd been looking for. I'd park my company car, and I'd kind of swagger over the truck. I'd stand there, I'd look up at the cab, and this big hair-covered creature would come down out of it. I'd look him square in the chin, and I'd say, "I'm here to get your truck." And he'd say to me, "Boy, I don't know if you've noticed from down there, but we're alone in these woods." I'd say, "Yes, sir," and I'd go back to the company car. And they'd say, "Look, just go away and leave me alone." I'd say, "Hey, no worries, Mac, I'm out of here." And I'd start to drive off. I'd pause for a second and say, "Excuse me, but one last comment before I leave. I'm the last nice guy they plan to send. See ya." And they said, wait, whoa. What do you mean, last nice guy?" I said, "Well, after me, it gets kind of ugly. You know, they send these big bruisers with guns and sheriffs. Not a pretty sight." And they said, "Well, what are my options?" And I'd say, "Set the gun down." And, on 3 occasions, that literally was the case. And I'd show them what their options were. And 9 times out of 10, I'd either get a partial payment if they had it, or a payment, or if they didn't have any money at all, what they would do is they'd drive the truck back to the dealership. I couldn't operate those things. And I'd give them a ride home. So I did okay as a bill collector. I didn't like the work, but I did all right. Now, the guy who took over after me didn't do as well. His name was Pete Smith. Now, Pete Smith made a serious tactical error. He went directly from the Marine Corps into bill collecting. How many Marines have we got in the room? Let me see the hands. Yeah, I used to ask how many ex-Marines we had, and then I found out it's a permanent condition. Once you're a Marine, Semper Fi, always faithful. Okay, so Pete comes out of the Marines. Now, Pete made the mistake of believing his drill sergeants. He thought he was invincible. So he goes out on the job with that attitude that he had in boot camp. And the first day on the job, well, not first day, first week on the job, he called on Monroe. Not Monroe, Monroe. Now, Monroe had been giving me partial payments all the time. Maybe he was always paying something, but he was always behind on his overall account. And I'd put up with it. Well, Pete decided it was time to clean up the account. So he goes out to Monroe's house, 7 o'clock at night in the dark, in the poor part of town, up around Newport, Arkansas. Goes out, bangs on the door, yells out some kind of a challenge, which Monroe accepted. You're ahead of me. Monroe stepped onto the front porch. Pete said something like, "All right, Smith's a name, credit's a game. I want your money, your wife, your car, or your life. You make the call." Those weren't his words, but I guarantee you that was the attitude. Monroe reduced him to a quivering lump of flesh. It took him about 15 seconds to beat Pete Smith to a pulp, and then he disappeared with the truck, never to be seen again. Pete, in the meantime, went into the Newport, Arkansas hospital for 14 days. That's a long stay, folks. And I looked at that and I thought, now that's the same guy who was giving me payments. What's the difference between Pete and me, other than current condition? Thought maybe it's education. So I went to our personnel file and I looked, same education. Okay, I bet it's training. So I checked our training records. We had both completed the company's 3-part course, which at that time was, these are your accounts, these are your business cards. Good luck. Well, it was dangerous work. What was the main difference between me and Pete? What do you think? Attitude, yeah. The way we looked at what we did. Point of view, frame of mind, attitude toward what we were doing. Pete went out there as a persuader to talk people into buying, more or less, cooperating, right? I knew if I tried that, I'd never have offspring, okay? So I figured it's going to be a lot more enlightened on my part to go out there as a partner in problem solving. So the way I approached people is I'd say, "Hi, I'm Jim Cathcart. I'm here from the company. It's my job to show you how to get us off your back." And when they were convinced I was sincere, when they could tell I wasn't playing a game with them, they'd open their homes, they'd offer me coffee, we'd sit down and solve the problem. See, the same thing's true for you and me. There's a principle here. It's the principle that applies to selling. It applies to managing people. Certainly applies to bill collecting. It applies to parenting, the way you raise your kids. You find that the most effective parents are the ones that are helping their children grow, not forcing them to behave in a particular pattern. Which is more important? To get your kids to complete their homework, or to cause your kids to love to learn? And what's the difference in the two? Get them to complete their homework, what do you get? Homework. What's that worth? Right? Get them to love to learn. Cultivate in your children an enjoyment of the learning process. You don't have to look for homework for the rest of their lives, because they will find a way to figure out what they need to know, because they love the experience of learning. Frame of mind or point of view is enormous. So you say to me, all right, well, I already go out there as a partner in problem solving. I already train my people when they contact the businesses that we do business with. I train them to approach it as a system seller, a problem solver. You know, go in there and look for a solution, not just peddle some goods. Okay, good. But do the customers get it that that's where you're coming from? See, what we've got to do is we've got to be sensitive to their mindset and notice throughout the sales dialogue, whether it's on the phone, through email, or face-to-face, we've got to notice whether they're perceiving us as one or the other. And then do the things that lower the tension, raise the trust, and lead to more sales. I've rewritten the book Relationship Selling. It'll come out in September. And I rewrote it as the 8 competencies of relationship selling, because I found that there are 8 sets of skills, not just a few skills, but 8 packages, each of which has a lot of skills in it, that constitute sales effectiveness in the whole concept of relationship selling. Think about your own strengths, yours as a person and yours as a company. Which of these skill sets are the strongest? Now, there's 8 of them up here. Preparing, that's sales readiness, being ready to do the job well even when the circumstances change. There's targeting the right people, not wasting time calling on the people that are less productive for you. Okay? There's connecting with the people you've targeted in such a way that they want to do more business with you, to talk with you. They want to open up and expose their needs so that you can prescribe the right solution. There's assessing both the personal needs and the situational needs, not just prescribing technically the products they need, okay, but also understanding why they need them and how they feel about that, okay. There's solving the main problem, and that's a whole set of skills around finding, highlighting, and solving the main problem that they're concerned about. Then there's assuring that they make a commitment to it, that you're actually what we used to call closing the sale, which is actually confirming the sale and opening the flow of services and goods, right? So closing, really an inappropriate choice of words. But it's commitment, and that's a set of skills. Then there's assuring that they stay satisfied after you're not in touch with them that week. After the phone call's over, after the delivery, assuring that they stay satisfied. That's a whole set of delivery and service skills. And then finally, there's managing yourselves for improved sales performance, which is everything from tracking your own numbers to keeping yourself motivated to maintaining the right frame of mind among your team to keep them thinking in terms of service and looking for needs and opportunities. So there's 8 of them up there. Which of the 8 are the strongest in your organization? Choose the top 2. Top 2 strongest in your own organization. How many of you would put the preparation and sales readiness in your top 2? Could I see your hands? Okay. How many would put targeting the right prospects or customers in your top 2? Okay. How many of you aren't going to raise your hand no matter what I ask next? Okay. I just want to see who I'm working with here. All right. Connecting, top 2. Good. That went up a lot. All right. Assessing the needs, top 2. Good at assessing the needs. All right. Solving, top 2. Commit, top 2. Good. All right. Assuring satisfaction. And finally, managing yourselves for improved sales, top 2. Now, whichever are your top 2 strongest automatically exposes what the 6 are that are not your top 2. You already know what your homework is. Here's one way to look at it. Put it on a wheel like this with the dot in the center being 0 and the outer perimeter being 10, and each one of these is a rating scale. And sometime when you've got a few free moments to think about this, or maybe while you're here, do this little assessment gram, I don't know what you'd call the thing, evaluation wheel, and just put a little dot on each line between 0 and 10 as to where you feel you currently are as an organization in the strength in that particular sales competency. And then connect the dots within the circle and see what kind of shape you come up with. And I'll bet you it's not a circle. What do you bet? What that tells you is which areas need a little more emphasis, more attention, which areas need some more training, which areas need some more resources maybe to compensate for an ongoing shortage in that area. So I hope it's a helpful tool, something you can use. And watch the bookstores in the fall for the 8 competencies of relationships. No, don't watch the bookstores. Buy the book. Boxes of them. Give them to everybody. Okay. Here are some assumptions I'm working on today. First assumption, if people continue to think as they do today, they will continue to perform as they do today. Could I get an amen to that one? Thank you. If we don't change people's thinking, we will not change their performance. Okay. Second assumption. When people are not held accountable, performance lapses are commonplace. Accountability is what drives society. It's what makes an organization or a family or a community work. Without accountability, somebody's pulling the wagon while somebody else is kicking back and taking a free ride. Okay? So we've got to have accountability, but we've got to change people's thinking if we want to change their performance. Likewise, if people can't see tomorrow clearly, they assume tomorrow is going to be like today or like yesterday. So part of our job as leaders, part of our job as the people who go to the conferences, the people who soak up this new information, the people who convert the ideas from the main platforms and the breakout sessions into practical application dialogue in the hallways afterwards, we need to help other people see what's possible. We need to paint some pictures of what tomorrow can be. Because if it continues to look like it used to look, nobody's going to change their behavior. And if nobody changes their behavior, no, it doesn't stay the same. We fall behind. Agreed? Got to constantly grow and change. So what's coming? I don't know. I know some things, and you know some things. You know, we know that e-commerce is enormous, but it's minuscule compared to what it will soon be. We know that skills that we used to deny that we were going to need, you know, like email and things like that. Nah, I don't need to fool with that. I got people that do that. Remember those days? Yeah, we're talking way back in like, I don't know, 99. You know, we're finding that, of course, we've got to have new skills. Sure, technology's getting easier. Technology's getting more user-friendly. But at the same time, if we're not constantly learning and growing, we're quickly becoming obsolete. So as we come to the conferences like this, as we go online, we do research, we talk with our colleagues, and we find out what's coming, we need to ask ourselves further, what do we need to do to be ready for what's coming? Because if you're not ready for it when it gets here, guess what? It's not your opportunity. It's somebody else's. Ooh, a little disturbing thought, huh? So if you want to know more, start to notice more. And start noticing more in a lot of areas. Look outside your own field. I want to run through a little scenario with you here. This is a model where I just talk about how long it took various technologies, most of which you deal with on a day-to-day basis, how long it took these technologies to reach 30% market adoption, saturation point, beyond which it starts to just flash into everybody's world. Okay? For the telephone, it took 38 years for 30% of the market to adopt it. 38 years. The television took 17. Personal computers, 13 years. Scanning technology, over 10 years. Wireless phones, 10 years. Remember when it was so fun, so clever to call somebody from their front porch and tell them to answer the doorbell and then you rang it? Wow. Okay. We've come a long way. Hey, put it on mute, will you? Okay. We've come a long way. The Internet took 7 years. Now, has anybody picked up a trend yet? What's next? I don't know. How long is it going to take to be adopted? Less than... Exactly. See, what happens is society advances based on two things, based on the solutions we produce and on the connections we sustain. So what we've got to do is we've got to focus on the servers and make sure that the CBLF servers are right. If we're going to have all this technology and it's all changing and evolving, if we don't take care of this part, we've got a serious problem. At this point, I usually entertain questions. Would there be any questions at this point? So what is a CBLF server? That would be a carbon-based life form. You and me. It's always the human factor that determines whether it's going to work, isn't it? Okay. So what matters most in all this? Well, people matter, but so do things. Look at this. Systems, information, cost, of course. Values matter. Lots of things. Relationships, leadership, sure. And you matter. It depends when you ask the question what the answer really is. Someone says, what matters most? Well, if you're doing a cost analysis, cost matter most, right? If it's tax time, accuracy would be good, okay? There's not a thing up here that doesn't matter. It's just that they take their own turns being in number one position. So what matters most? All these things matter most, sometimes. But people, including you, that's what packages all of it. These are not in any particular priority order. They're just up there because that's the way they came out when I typed it in, right? So if all these things matter, then we've got to make sure that we don't neglect any of these. I said a while ago that society advances based on the solutions that we produce, the kind of products and services, and the connections we sustain. So what we've got to have is pH balance. pH, profits high. pH, people happy. Does that work for you? Okay. Now, if you've got really high profits and your people are not happy, what's coming? That's right. Okay. So what if you make your people really, really happy, but you never get your profits up again? Become a church, you get a tax advantage. Okay. Maybe you just ought to work on both sides, huh? So it's kind of like this technology. I've got a piece of business technology over here I want to show you. It's sort of like this. Remember slinkies? Actually, it's not technically a slinky, but it's a coil spring, and the most popular brand is called Slinky. Which side makes it work? Yeah. I mean, it's a dumb question, isn't it? Okay. So I want you to just watch the Slinky for a second. And think of the Slinky as representing profits and people, the two primary issues in a business, okay? Profits, which is the product side, which is the system side, and all the, the technical part. And people, the human side, the interactions, the relationships, the sales, and so forth. Okay? How much action does it take on my part to bring this thing to life? Notice how much actual force I have to put into it. All I'm doing is just barely moving my fingers. And yet this thing's going back and forth just fine. But if I overemphasize one side, all of a sudden it stops. And it doesn't matter which side I overemphasize. So I've got to pay attention to both. I can't neglect either. But if I overemphasize one, then I end up with a really bizarre outcome. Same thing's true in your world. Okay? And that's true for businesses that are pretty large. And that's true for tiny little operations as well. The principles transfer. They're absolutely the same across the board. So here's the leader's dilemma. Okay, a person's sitting there and they say, okay, I run my own company. I got my people. I got all my systems in place. But Jim, you're recommending I spend an awful lot of time with the people side of it. What if I put all this energy into training my people and then they leave? Valid concern. Here's a more important concern, though. What if you don't and they stay? Shudder at the thought, huh? It's not optional. I mean, we don't have the option of not training our people, of not guiding their thinking and developing the right frame of mind toward all this. It's part and parcel of leadership. It's what comes from being in a position where you can make a difference. It's a basic responsibility. But there are vital relationships we have to lead people into. For example, if the person doesn't feel connected to the organization, they always will seem like an outsider, even if they've been there 30 years. If it were possible to live that long, and it may be, that you could have been with S.P. Richards from 1848 to now, if you didn't feel a connection with the vision, the values, the beliefs of this organization, even today, after all that time, you'd still feel like an outsider, someone that didn't belong. But if you do embrace what the organization's about, you feel like family the first day. So that's one of our primary roles, is we've got to get people to embrace the organization itself, to understand it and care about it and believe in it, or go somewhere else if they don't. Okay? Second thing is we've got to make sure they understand in the overall scheme of things, what's their part? Where do they fit in this matrix? They need to see how, when they produce a result and it goes to the next level, what do those people do with it, and how do they feel about the way they get it? And when they get something from someone else, where are they in the food chain? And how does it go back upstream, right? Also, they need to understand the technology they're dealing with and understand more than just the operation of it. They need to understand a little bit of the why that makes it that way, so they can help make it even better. Okay? If a person doesn't have a sense of purpose in what they do, they won't add much value to what they do. Would you agree with that? If you don't find much purpose in what you do, you won't add much value to what you do. Quick story. Years ago, I was in Atlanta in the airport, and I was in the food court. And I was standing there with my little coffee and muffin, and I was just watching all the people. It was really, really crowded. It was like out in the foyer this morning, people everywhere, thousands and thousands of them. And I chose not to fight for a table, so I just stood back and had my little snack. And I noticed a busboy who's bussing tables, but he looks like this. Slumped shoulders, long droopy face, kind of dragging his feet. And he goes from table to table, and he picks up a tray, and he gets the trash, and he's making eye contact with nobody. Goes over, he throws away the trash, takes his rag, goes to another table. I'm getting depressed watching this guy. I'm thinking, somebody ought to do something. So finally I finished my meal, and I threw away the trash, and I went over and I just tapped him on the shoulder. He recoiled. I think he thought he was going to get in trouble. I said, "Excuse me." He said, "Yeah." And I said, "What you're doing sure makes a difference here." He said, "No, sir, I did." Huh? I said, "What you're doing sure makes a difference here." I said, "Look at this place. It's jam-packed with people. If you weren't cleaning these tables, in 5 minutes there'd be trash everywhere. The place would be unsanitary, unpleasant. People wouldn't come. What you're doing matters. I just wanted to say thanks for doing it. See ya. Now, I'm walking off. He's in shock. But in the time it took me to walk about 10 feet, when I glanced back, I swear he had grown 6 inches. He didn't become serviceman. Hey, good morning, welcome to the food court. Boy, it looks like you could use one of our bread muffins. Let me help you out here. You know, nothing like that went on. All that happened is he went from depressed to neutral. Neutral. But what do you bet for the balance of his shift? He did his work a little bit better. Fair assumption? Okay. What do you bet for the balance of his shift? He felt better about himself and handled problems a little more smoothly. Okay. What had I done? Complimented him. I acknowledged him. A guy in Seattle said, Jim, you gave him back his dignity. Ooh, that's kind of lofty. I don't know that I did that, but here's what I did do. I pointed out the direct connection between his performance and the effect it had on other people. I pointed out the direct connection between his performance and the effect it had on other people. He knew about that, but he hadn't thought about that. He didn't think about it very often at all, I'll bet. How many times do your people think about it? How many times do you think about it in a given day? You say, well, given, that's the point, Jim. It's a given. Hey, when it's a given like that, I'll guarantee you it's not getting much mental energy or much emotional investment. If we don't consciously and intentionally remember and notice the purpose of what we're doing, then we tend to become bureaucratic and just get caught up in the process of what we're doing. When people don't see much purpose in what they do, they won't bring much value to what they do. It matters. It matters. Person to person. How many of you have ever seen your business suffer because two of the people in it didn't deal with each other very effectively? Get them up. Yeah, exactly. Everyone in the room. People problems are an enormous business expense. So, is it just up to you just slap them around and say, grow up? I don't think so. I think it's a skill thing, it's an attitude thing, it's an inspiration thing. We need to inspire them. We need to lead them in such a way that they feel the need or the impetus to rise above that and to acquire the skills for resolving personal conflict. And also, person to self. If a person doesn't feel good about him or herself, it will show up in their work. Agreed? Absolutely. So it really pays to support and encourage personal development through your organization. We used to say, nah, that's their personal problem. You know, that's something, that's not job related. The heck it's not. It shows up on the job. That's job related. We're talking dollars here, right? Okay? So there are a lot of vital relationships that expand our thinking about what does it mean to be a leader, be a manager, be a director of sales, be a vice president of an organization. There's a lot to it. Organizational DNA, the genetic code of your organization, is contained in what you believe in, care about, stand for, and how you express yourself to the community. And that's the first thing people have to embrace in order to really be a part of the organization itself. I'm going to show you a little grid here that takes the two things, awareness, how you think, and performance, what you do. It's kind of fun, standing in front of a race car like this and saying the word performance, I feel like kneeling. That's nice. By the way, I really appreciate the fact that you chose silver cars to give away in the year that's the 25th year, silver anniversary of Cathcart Institute. I thought that was very thoughtful of you. Thank you. Years ago, when my marriage 25th came about, my wife Paula said, Jim, you know, our 25th is coming up. And I said, yeah, I know. That's our silver anniversary. She said, no, it's not. I said, yes, it's our silver anniversary. She said, no, it's our diamond anniversary. I said, you're right. I said, do you want to specify shape or just size? She said, size will do. Supported by baguettes. And she described what she was looking for and gave me time to save up for it, thank heavens. She said, by the way, what do you want? And I said, just wait till you get your diamond. And then we got it, and I said, all right, your turn. I want you on the back seat of my motorcycle as I tour the Alps for 16 days, 3,000 miles. She said, done. Most romantic experience we ever had. Just riding through those mountain passes and by the little villages, day after day in Austria, Switzerland, Germany, France. Oh, man. So we did it again for our 30th. A few years will be our 35th. I think we'll do it again. Boy, ain't life grand. I tell you what. Awareness and performance. How you think and what you do equals mastery. If you put it on a grid, it looks like this. The two dimensions, how you think, awareness. How you do, that's performance. Awareness ranges from ignorance to enlightenment. And if you look at that, low awareness, person doesn't know much about what they're doing. They tend to focus only on the process, just the details, the steps. They become very rigid on process, okay? But the people who really think about it are purpose-driven. They're doing what they're doing because it matters that they do it that way. The process matters only because the purpose exists. Without the purpose, the process is just bureaucracy, as I said a while ago. Okay? So how do you get people to not be so process-focused? Talk about the reasons. Talk about the purpose. Tell the stories within your own organization of how you're impacting the customers. Because if you just hear the stories and get the testimonials from time to time, but you don't wave those flags, you don't run them up the flagpole and let everybody hear about them, they won't think about them. And if it's not in the front of your mind, it's not in the front of your performance either. Purpose. Performance. Most people only do what's required. They do. They've got no reason to do more than that, most people. So they just do what's required. But a few people are exceptional. They step beyond the requirements and do more than they have to. Now, we created through this 4 quadrants within this grid. Low awareness and low performance, that's process-driven, doing only what's required. Okay? High awareness, low performance, that's purpose-driven, but still just doing what's required. High performance, low awareness, don't think about it much, but do a lot of work, not much thought. Okay? And then high awareness, high performance, upper right-hand quadrant. Here's what the names of them are. Low awareness, low performance, I call the passenger. They're just along for the ride. Now, there's a passenger in your organization, or a passenger, if you're thinking about this in a sales context, a customer that's buying from you, low awareness, low performance, not acting on it, not thinking about it much. Do they need education to raise their awareness or motivation to raise their performance? Yes. They need both, right? Okay? A person who's a critic, someone who's high in awareness but low in performance. They talk a great game, but they become what Brian Tracy told me is an articulate incompetent. Intellectually arrogant. Okay? Do they need more awareness to make them more effective? Heck no. They need more motivation, more behavior, more performance. Okay? So you can look at this and look at the person you're dealing with and know pretty quickly whether you need to focus on action, which would be a motivation issue, or focus on understanding, which would be an information issue. High action, low thinking, that's the competitor. The competitor doesn't need more motivation, they need more education, information. And the leader, whether they're in a leadership position or not, I mean, they don't have to have anybody answering to them but themselves. To be a leader requires high awareness and high performance. With them, you don't need information or motivation to get them going. You just need to point them right and get the heck out of the way. Now, is that something you can use? Okay. The AP grid.